Young, like a new moon rising, fierce through the rain and lightning, wandering out into this great unknown. And I don't want no one to cry, but tell them if I don't survive, I was born free. I was born free. I was born free. Born free. Free like a river raging strong is the wind I'm facing, chasing dreams and racing Father Time. Deep like the grandest canyon, wild like an untamed stallion. If you can't see my heart, you must be blind. You can knock me down and watch me bleed, but you can't keep no chains on me. I was born free. I was born free. I was born free. Born free. And I'm not good at long goodbyes, but look down deep into my eyes. I was born free. Calm, facing danger, lost like an unknown stranger. Grateful for my time with no regrets. Close to my destination, tired, frail and aching, waiting patiently for the sun to set. And when it's done, believe that I will yell it from that mountain high. I was born free. I was born free. I was born free. Born free. And I will bow to the shining seas and celebrate God's grace on me. I was born free. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, oh,
And all of us were born free, except when they converted you into a modern day slave. And in today's podcast, we're hoping to teach you how to correct your political status. We're going to talk a little bit about that and help you to get out of the modern day slave system. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the American States Assembly's podcast. I'm one of your hostesses, Tammy Healy on New Jersey, and I serve the New Jersey Assembly as our outreach committee head. And in fact, I'd like to invite you, if you are on New Jersey, to our next in-person outreach event that's happening October 25th. It's a week from today, I believe, and we're going to be at Buffalo Wild Wings in Rockaway, New Jersey at 6:30 p.m. The doors open, and we usually get started a little thereafter, but we would love to meet you and get to introduce ourselves to you and introduce what we're all about. So check us out on our website and come to one of our events. Our next hostess is Michelle Ford on California. Michelle serves the California Assembly as their state coordinator. And Michelle also hosts online Common Law 101 classes that you can reach at this link right here, scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Michelle always does a great job. Those you can reach her at, I believe it's Tuesdays and Thursdays, right, Michelle? Tuesday at 10 and Thursdays at 9. And that's Pacific time. Am I correct there, Michelle? Yeah. Okay, yep. Good. And she does a great job with the Q&A at the end. So if you want to catch that and learn a little bit more about common law, which is the law of the land, by the way, I highly recommend her classes. And before we get started with, before we introduce to you our guests from the Virginia Assembly, Michelle's going to give us a little lowdown on the fraud and stuff that's taken place.
All right, great. Thank you, Tammy. I'd like to go ahead and share my screen here. So I'm going to pull up the slide. Let me know when you can see it. Okay, sorry, I'm having a little moment here.
That darn technology.
I know, seriously. Let me do. All right. Now, can you see my, is it popping up on your side yet?
Not yet, Michelle.
No.
Oh, shoot. Okay. All right. Hopefully it will any second now.
Click the order button.
I got it.
There you go.
There we go. Okay, good. Sorry. It's a thick file. So, all right, everybody, we've all learned, if you grew up in America, right? You learned that this is the way that power is supposed to flow, where the people are in charge and our government workers are our employees, and that the people, run everything, right? So this is the way that power is supposed to flow in America. This is actually a demonstration. This little diagram here is of the laws of the land. And we know that, for example, right, we've got the Constitution. It's supposed to be the supreme law of the land. And the laws of the land the law of the land is designed for living people and ensures that living people continue to control those aspects of life that are important to them. But something has gone wildly wrong. I mean, you look around the world today and it just does not feel like the America that we were promised in school. So what's been going on is it looks a little bit more like this, where the territorial and municipal subcontractors, our government workers are actually in charge, and the people are stuck at the bottom, having almost no rights, very little say in what actually goes on. And behind closed doors, we have politicians and other government workers that, sign away bills up to the governor's desk, and they push their agendas upon us. And it's not supposed to be that way. What's been happening is known as the law of the sea, right? The territorial and municipal subcontractors are operating under this law of the sea, and in some ways law of the air, but I don't want to make it too complicated. But essentially the power flow has been inverted, and it's unlawful the way that it's been going, because the laws of the sea are designed to serve the interests of businesses and corporations. And those corporations are known as persons, otherwise known as dead entities. And so what this unlawful conversion has unfortunately subjected us, unknowingly, this conversion, right? No one knows about this conversion. It's subjected us to the laws of the sea. And so what we're here to talk about today is a way that you can reverse that and restore your lawful government. So I'll hand it back over to you, Tammy.
All right. Thank you so much for that. I love those visuals. I think they help people a lot because, like you said, we learned what the American government was supposed to be like in school, but that's not what we see happening. And it's very confusing. People don't, understand what's going on. But when we see it in a visual like that, it starts to make a little bit more sense. So, without further ado, we'd like to introduce you to our guests today from the Virginia Assembly. So first we have Kevin Barry Miller. who serves the Virginia Assembly as their state coordinator. Kevin was born in a military family. His dad was in the U.S. Navy for 23 years, retired 05 commander. Did I say that right? 05?
Yes.
Okay. Full honors, and he is buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Kevin spent 29 years in software and computer programming to include weapon systems on submarines and E-6B naval aircraft. Exactly what happened in the movie Crimson Tide with Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington. Kevin is also a musician, and he's been with the Virginia Assembly since its first meeting on April 9th of 2019. Welcome, Kevin, to the podcast. I'm just curious, what kind of a musician are you?
I'm a little bit, well, that's kind of funny. I started playing saxophone very early on in 4th grade, and then I switched, and I played multiple saxophones. I even still own a couple saxophones. Then I switched to bass, electric bass. Then other things happened where I switched to guitar for some years and drums for some years, and back to guitar and back to bass. But since as of a few years ago, I've sort of thought I should dedicate myself to one thing. So I thought, what do I like the most? And I like the bass. So as of a few years ago, I'm formally only a bass player, but I still have 2 drum sets and umpteen guitars and umpteen different amps and stuff like that. And so
I guess when you're a musician, right, if you're a true musician, you can pick up pretty much any instrument and teach yourself how to play. That sounds like what you've done.
Except for piano. I can't figure the piano out, but everything else, yeah.
It's a very similar story. My second son, I have 3 sons and a daughter, but my second son didn't do he did well with sports, but he wasn't really into it like my first son. But he gravitated towards instruments, and he also started with the saxophone, was an amazing saxophone player, but he can teach himself how to play keyboard. He taught himself how to play the guitar. So it's an amazing talent. So I was just curious. Thank you for explaining that. And welcome also to the podcast. Thank you for coming on today. Our next guest is Randell Alan Rimbey, who serves the Virginia State Assembly as their Marshal at Arms. He is also a part-time athletic trainer and full-time husband and father of 2 boys. He is a living, breathing man, a Pennsylvanian by birth, but has been domiciling in Virginia since 1983. He is endeavoring to restore and establish the lawful governance of Virginia. He and his wife became American state nationals in June of 2022. He volunteered to learn the role of Marshal at Arms in January of this year and was finally nominated and elected on July 13th this year. And he quotes, "It was exciting, satisfying, and humbling being the first Marshal at Arms in Virginia since 1860. That's a pretty amazing little side note there, Randall. He is currently providing security for the Virginia State General and Jural Assemblies, as well as offering energy or she, which he's going to get into a little later, to our fellow assemblymen and women to step up and volunteer and do the governance work for the people. We welcome you today to our podcast, Randall. Thank you so much for coming on. And, we look forward to hearing about that she. And, I guess we can I'm going to just ask, could you both share how you came to find the Virginia Assembly? And whoever wants to go first is fine with me.
Go ahead, Randy. You first.
Okay. Yeah. Since she just segued into me, it'd be perfect. All right. So, sort of a parallel story here. Tammy mentioned the she, and I didn't understand it until just probably a month or 2 ago. We all have grown up in this country under a certain energy. We learn from our parents, we learn from our education, we learn from our government. And from the time we were born, that's all we knew. And so we just kind of followed along with everything. And through my high school years, college years, even beyond that, I really didn't pay much attention to government at all. I had more important things on my mind, like girls and entertainment and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't until the last 3 years that my heart began to change. You know, I started to be suspicious during the Obama administration. We all remember the stories of Fast and Furious and Hillary's Benghazi thing. That started to kind of wake me up, saying, what's wrong with this country that we can act like that to people and do that to our government? Anyway, one thing leads to the next. I'll try and shorten my story. One thing leads to the next. There was a stolen election. We all know that we just loved our DJT. Sorry if you don't, but that's okay. He turned this country around on a dime and showed us how exactly it could be run, albeit still not lawful. He was still making that corporation run very well. At any rate, things were pretty darn good. And then there was a stolen election, and that infuriated me. I'm like, okay. I go to bed at 10:30, 11 o'clock. He's got this thing locked up. I wake up at 7:30 in the morning to hear that our resident is in charge. And so I was like, what? That was the first big shot, really a big shot to say, what is wrong? What's happening? And I ran around and complained, and I was frustrated with everybody, like we all do, right? We all like, why? Why is that? I don't understand. What do we do? Let's do something. I don't know. We don't know what to do. At any rate, the next thing that happened is, COVID hit. COVID hit, and I began to see the violations of the Nuremberg trials, the Hague Conventions, all those things that are supposed to protect us people from those kinds of things were being violated, all for the sake of a, I'll just say it, a shot. At any rate, that was very concerning to me. And then all of a sudden, we're masking up, we're getting shot in the head with thermometers, etc. And the next thing you know, the mandates start coming out from employers. And it was pretty quiet on our side for a little while, and then all of a sudden, STHF, things went south, and all of a sudden I got this email saying you can't return next fall unless you've had your two shots. I went and had the conversation, firm and kind, right? I wasn't trying to be irritated, but I just want to let them know where my thoughts lied. And they said, you only have one option. The only option that you have two options. One option is to go ahead and get your shots. Number two, we'll allow you a religious or a medical or exemption. Well, I had until July 1st to get this medical or religious exemption because I knew I wasn't taking the shots. At any rate, my doctor's office, and it doesn't mean anything, but I had open heart surgery in 2004. That's a whole nother story. At any rate, I had already heard the stories of myocarditis within the vaccinations. And so I went to my GP. I said, look, it's a no-brainer, I think, right? I've had open heart surgery. Myocarditis is starting to rear its mighty head. I need my exemption. Can you write me exemption? Well, he drug his feet. He drug, couple follow-up calls. But at the end of the end of June, even before we got to July 1st, I got a call into the office saying, Rand, I was with a client. Rand, come on in. We want to talk to you about your exemption status. I'm like, okay, be right there. I went in and sat down. And as soon as I sat down, I saw the human resources officer sitting in the corner. Instantly, chills went up and down my spine. And I knew it was coming. And he goes, well, how's your exemption coming? And I said, well, I still haven't heard from the doctor yet, but I feel pretty solid. Okay, leave your keys on the desk and leave. And I was handed a piece of paper with 6 weeks of severance pay and just go. That's how I was treated after, in this particular position, 5 years of my 60 or 70 hours a week between two workforces. I was just because of my choice, and that's all I can bring it to, was my choice, I was let go. And that was it. That turned my energy from going with the flow to, You ain't doing this to me anymore. That's it. We got to find some change. So I spent a couple of months feeling sorry and down, and I actually called attorneys. Attorneys didn't even want to talk to me because there was no so-called proof that I could prove without a shadow of doubt. And in Virginia, unfortunately, there's a right to work law that allows an employer to fire you no matter what. They can make up any story they want. You know, that's how the corporate works, right? It's a color of law. They make it, they can take one statute and change it, change a word, change the verbiage or the meaning, and make it mean something else. And all of a sudden you have no case. That's the way they work. So, no luck. I started to have more time, obviously, started to get online, started to look at Facebook Reels, started to look at things. Somebody told me about Parler. I don't know if you guys remember the old Parler chat line. That went out of business, but I started to learn a lot with Parler. And then it went to Clout Hub, and now Telegram is the big deal. And I won't go that far, but I learned a lot. And so here's how the stages occurred. The first thing I saw and heard about American State National was through David Straight. Now, say what you want about David Straight. He does some good stuff for some people. He's educating some people. But my education about him really wasn't finishing what I really wanted. He battles within that corporate zone. He shows people how to navigate within that zone, but never really tells people how to create a governance. And my thing is, all right, suppose the best thing happens and the territorial municipal governments are taken down. All right, so what do we have left? Well, what we have left is chaos, right? If we didn't have anything to come up in its place, what we got is chaos. We need a government. But what I heard him say that one day was American State National. I just plugged it in the search bar. TASA website. There it is. Oh my God. Whew. I went crazy. And you know, as we all do, the first time we look at that website, right? It's like you start scrolling and you're tabbing and there's like this influx of information about, I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional, but the stuff that was withheld from us for a century and a half or more was withheld from us. Anyway, I absorbed myself into it. The next thing you know, I'm on the Virginia tab in our fledgling assembly. Well, I wasn't fledgling, I guess, at that point. I'd already been up and running for a couple of years. And I called Patty over. I'm like, Patty, take a look at this stuff. And she's like, oh my God, that the birth certificate, we're commerce. We're not people. Oh, how does that even happen? Well, the energy grew. And then Kevin and company and our older coordinator, they held a gathering up in Northern Virginia for all the American State Nationals. And Patty and I said, we're going. We didn't know anybody, but we showed up and we met the people and it felt right. It just felt good because we all had a common goal. I didn't want to get emotional, but anyway, so the common goal was to raise a government. And so that was right up my alley. That's how I got started in this process. I'll yield there because I'm starting to ramble. But that's why I'm an American State citizen today, being a first elected official on Virginia since probably 1860. So.
Yeah, that is such a beautiful story. You know, don't be ashamed of getting emotional. I mean, it is emotional. You know, I remember learning about this and just feeling, you know, Anna talks about the grieving process that you go through. You know, and I can certainly say that I experienced that as well. I actually was more skeptical, you know, and like, I don't know who this Anna von Reitz lady is. Like, how do I know that, you know, she's giving me this information correctly? So I kind of went off of the site and did my own research and then just came back to her. And I was like, oh, she actually is right. Oh my God. And then all the articles that she has on her own personal website, I'm going to actually put her website up going across now for our audience who wants to do some research. She's got, 4,400 articles now up there. I mean, you could put in the search engine, you could put any topic you want to know about, birth certificate. You could put IRS. You could put commerce.
Blueberry.
Yeah, anything that you want. And she has pretty much written about it. So anyway, I love that story. Thank you, Randall, for sharing that. Kevin, could you share with us your story? We'd love to hear yours.
Well, I'll try and be quick about this. Basically, my story started, and I think that all of us who find Anne von Rights and American State Nationals and this type of history and law, there's always something oppressive or dramatic that happens in your life. And Randy described his as basically being fired for not taking the vax. Well, mine was a custody battle, which actually still is going on to this day. But back in 2013, actually 2012, I was going through a custody battle, and I started learning about all of this stuff. Okay, and I remember January 1st, I started learning about the quote unquote straw man. And during this whole time, I had an attorney at the time, and the attorney was doing nothing, was just bending over backwards, not working for me. And I'm paying this guy $500 an hour. And I'm like, something is not right here. And then I learned about the straw man, and then it clicked. And I knew that all these bar attorneys were all scumbags, okay? With very few, there are exceptions. I do know a couple of attorneys here in Virginia that are actually decent people, and they only do stuff like trusts and estate planning and stuff like that. And attorneys are great for that, or corporate law. But when it comes down to the living man or the living woman and stealing their kids, well, that's where it becomes dirty. Okay. So I was ongoing with this custody battle, learning more and more. I lost all custody because I was starting to tell the judge, and back then I didn't know what I was doing, right? But I was starting to talk about the straw man, and they sent me to numerous psychological counseling tests, right? So I actually had to, I had 3 of them, all right, back to back. They kept thinking I was crazy, and I was like, I'm not crazy. You're the ones who are crazy. But anyhow, fast forward to 2015, actually October, which was about 8 years ago, right? If my math is correct. And I found this and I had not heard about Anne von Rights, but I found the international obligation lien against the bar for $279 trillion. And I said, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for. Okay. And I was thinking that it would take immediate effect and I would have my son back, but that's not quite the case. But from that, I learned about Anne von Rights. I kept reading. I mean, I remember going into work some days and not doing any work, that I just read articles from Anne von Rights and just read law and history and stuff like that. Then again, fast forward to April of 2019, I received a phone call from, I don't remember how we got in touch, but we did, from the very first coordinator. His name was Alan Stein, or still is. As far as I know, he's still alive. But we decided to create the Virginia Assembly on April 9th, 2019. Oh, and I did my ASN paperwork, my 928s. And back then, the 1779 didn't even exist yet. So I did my 928s in September of 2018. But we formed the Virginia Assembly. There was only about 4 of us, and most of it was Alan Stein's family, because his son and his daughter were involved, and his wife. And then what we did, and we talked to Justice Ann about this, is we grew the assembly. We did our best to grow the Virginia Assembly, but there are other fledgling assemblies that we started meeting as a group, and that was, so Virginia came along first, and then we added North Carolina. So we, as an assembly, I mean, we knew that we were meeting as a group, but when we were to vote, we would have to do it within our own states, right? We couldn't vote. We couldn't have North Carolina voting with Virginia, but we met as a group to help foster our growth. So pretty soon it became South Carolina, and then Tennessee, and then Connecticut. Now, Alan Stein was coordinator for about 1.5 years, and I was co-coordinator during those times. So I was listening to the Sunday night coordinator calls from way back in the beginning, back in 2019. But then Alan left, I think he had some health issues. He went off into a different direction. And at that time, the 5 assemblies they were big enough where they went off on their own. Then we had a second coordinator, Anna Marie, and not to be confused with Anna Vaughn, but we had Anna Marie, and she stayed for about a year, I think. Then she voiced her opinion that she wanted to quit, and nobody else stood up. Okay, so I said, well, I don't want the job, but I'm going to have to do it. So I stood up, and here in Virginia, we did a vote for me being coordinator and chairman. And then I turned around and I told Terry, I said, look, I was co-coordinator for a year and a half, so I know the ropes. And she said, oh, okay, welcome back. And Terry recognized me as coordinator again, back in September of last year. So we've been moving along ever so steadily. We're getting things done, and I feel we're on the right track. So that's my basic story about how I found Anna Von Reitz and the Virginia Assembly.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that story. That's a heck of a story too. Thank you.
Yeah, it really is. And I love knowing that you've been around for so long, Barry. Your experience with challenges must be awesome, but it sounds like everybody on the Virginia Assembly is, all on the same page. So.
Yeah, everybody in our group is great. It really is. I mean, everybody, every time before we sign off, we all say we love each other, and we have. I am fortunate to have this awesome group. I wish we had more, which is one of our challenges, which is probably a question you might have a little bit later in this hour. But we have an awesome group, all of them.
That's awesome. Well, Randy, a little bit of a side note here, but could you explain why, as a status corrected American, we put a copyright symbol behind our name? Like, what does the all rights reserved without prejudice mean? And why do we need to autograph with that statement?
Sure. So as Kevin alluded to earlier, it stems from the birth certificate scam and taking our placenta and making it a legal fiction, right? So on the birth certificate, they take your name and they put it in all caps, Randell Rimbey. And from that point on, you're known as the legal fiction, Randell Rimbey. When you change your status, when you're walking away from the corporate government, you have to have a way to protect your name and true living lawful name from being pirated again, right? Yeah. So you copyright your name so that they can't look at that and go, oh, okay, well, he has a new name. Well, we'll just use that, and we'll still apply that to our legal fiction, and we'll still be in the ball game with this guy. We can still sell him off as commercial goods whenever we want to and trade them on NASDAQ in the stock market. So by putting and copywriting your name, they cannot impersonate you, right? Because that's what they try and do. They take your name and they impersonate you. And that's how the crime that's committed to personage against you. So that's what the C is for. And man, when I was first doing my 1779s and my recording secretaries are saying, now make sure you put a C in a circle behind your name. I'm like, what? What are we doing that for? And anyway, we seal that, as you know, with the big thumbprint, red ink thumbprint, because that's a wet ink signature. That means my living body autographed this document. It is me. I'm real. I'm breathing. It's not my legal fiction. All right. So that's that part. Now, and then the next thing is, well, now make sure you write down there, all rights reserved without prejudice. And I'm going, okay, what the heck is that? So, you learn as you go. All rights reserved. Okay. So when we walk away from the territorial municipal government, from the statutes, codes, laws, and regulations that are privileged, we get those privileges from our errant government, our employees, excuse me. When we walk away from that, we go back to the land and soil where natural law, common law, the 10 Commandments, mercy, remedy, all creates a sense of freedom for us, true freedom, our ability to guide ourselves in our lives. So when we say all rights reserved, that means now that I'm an American state national, my God-given, unalienable rights cannot be taken away from me. My rights in that capacity are reserved. Boom, case closed. The next part is without prejudice. And of course, your first thought is, well, I'm not racist. I'm not, I don't care, because you look at that word. That's how we use that word these days. When you ever say prejudice, you're talking against somebody else's beliefs, their sex, their color, their ethnicity, whatever. But that's not what that means. So here's what this means. So this you can link this to the UCC codes, Uniform Commercial Codes, right? So the Uniform Commercial Codes are how they control their commerce within their corporate government. And the UCC codes are designed actually to be sort of what we call the color of law. In other words, like I said, they can put something in writing, but they can make it mean whatever they want, right? And so because your chattel, because your commerce, whenever you sign on the dotted line, whenever you put your signature on anything, whenever you sign and date a so-called agreement, a contract, a mortgage, a registering for a gun permit, a fishing license, whatever that is, through that UCC code, you're signing that you understand what you just signed. However, we don't really understand what we just signed because it's not, that those laws don't apply to an American state national, right? So they don't care if you understand or that you're signing something that contracts you to what they asked you to do. We just kind of go along with the flow. That's what we were all doing it for years, right? Okay, I'll do this. All right, I'm signing this to get my mortgage. Okay, and I'll follow that. But what you didn't know is, as you're an American state national, you don't apply to those. And so without prejudice means I unknowingly applied my signature to a document that I didn't know was valid for me. And so with the prejudice part of that taken out, now you have standing within the American state land and soil to be able to say, no, I didn't understand I was signing an Admiralty Maritime contract. I didn't know any of that at the time. I thought I was getting a mortgage, right? So you're taking your way from the commerce part of that corporation, taking your feet back on the land and soil. And it's a way of, again, identifying yourself and protecting your autograph from chronic contract with the de facto corporate governments, all right? And then there's that. And what was the other thing, Michelle? I kind of lost track there.
Actually, you got it. You
did I get it all?
Symbol.
Okay.
You did the all rights reserved without prejudice. And
he's got this. Feel free to throw some stuff in there if you want.
Could I butt in here real quick?
Sure.
So my take on without prejudice, I like to break up that second term into two parts. So you have pre and Judas, or basically what I'm trying to say here is that word to me means pre-judgment. So the whole term is without pre-judgment. So when I sign a document without prejudice, I'm saying you cannot judge me before, you cannot prejudge anything about me or my standing or the law or my law form against your law form, which they do anyway. And Justice Anna says, when you walk into their courts, you're already prejudged. Okay, so that's sort of what that means, without prejudgment. On my documents, I also like to add the terms without recourse. Okay, so when I put without recourse on a document, I'm saying that you, Mr. Whoever or Mrs., you cannot come back to me. You cannot come back to me based upon you cannot have recourse against me, basically, due to whatever I put on this document. So, I would advise everybody use the term without recourse also on all the documents. I yield.
I love that. Thank you.
You can even impress the folks there by putting UCC code 13084 dot 6, because that's with all rates reserved and without prejudice. Those two. And when a judge sees that on there, they go,
Can I put in again?
Go ahead.
I would also advise, if you're going to use UCC terms, that you also use your state's UCC terms, okay? Because every state, and I think Louisiana might be the exception, every state has the exact same UCC within their own state codes. So I think it, like here in Virginia, I think it would be more applicable if we would to be used the Virginia UCC codes.
Understood.
So there's that.
I just wanted to add, if you don't mind, that because you talked about how they prejudge you, and basically, you are, when you go into their courts, you're found guilty. It's not like in our courts, you're innocent until proven guilty. And I just recently, last year, I had a friend of mine who works at a public school system here in New Jersey say that they had an assembly with their school. And it was a high school, and they had I think the town attorney, and they had the chief of police basically come in, and they were talking to the kids about, social media and how it's, dangerous to post things, anything on social media. And that basically they point blank told them that they are guilty and would have to prove their innocence, if they were found to post something that was bad on social media. And basically, we've seen a few people have their, kids getting their sports, accomplishments discredited, and colleges not even wanting to look at them because they've had these issues with, something happening on social media. It's so out of control. But I just thought it was interesting that they're point blank admitting that you are going to be guilty until proven innocent. And, we see that more and more with these courts.
Yeah. They want you to fit into the system and be a good slave.
Slave.
Yeah.
Dead slave.
Yeah. Go ahead, Randy.
Michelle, this goes back to what you said earlier as well about education. Actually, this all started with the Rockefellers back in the early 1900s with medicine, education, and everything else.
Yep.
And we know that in early 1970s, they threw out American history. The educational system started to throw out true American history for American civics. In other words, learning the law of the government. And so under that umbrella, over years past, what they teach you is the territorial municipal form of government. And we know that's where you are guilty until proven innocent, or vice versa, and all that other stuff is where it's coming from. I know there's a young lady in high school, because I work with her mom as one of my clients. She's in advanced history. She does not even know what the Bill of Rights is. She's in a pre-college program in high school. And when you say the Bill of Rights, what is that? Is that like a We the People thing? Well, what is all that?
Oh my!
And here she is. She's getting college credit for history. They're not even being taught the real. We all know now there's 3 constitutions, but basically they're not even being taught it. They're ignorant of it, and so ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is a trap, right? And that's what our young children are going through right now. We need to change that. I'm sorry,
Wow.
I'm rambling again. My bad.
No, I think it's an important distinction that you're bringing up because, like you said, they stopped teaching American history in the early 70s. And instead, what they've been teaching is something called U.S. history. And for most of us, we never, I grew up in a time that was, post that era, post that change. So I never got American history. I only ever got U.S. history. And as a result, I thought that was the history of our American government. But I think the most important point that you're bringing up right now is that there are 2 histories going on here. And we're taught that we're American, but really everything that we're learning is in relation to US, which is a corporation. So we're learning the laws of the sea and commingled with the laws of the air, which is really the municipal system. And we're not taught at all about, how there's a vastly different thing going on. We're told we have all these rights, but yet the US doesn't offer us that.
And that is no accident. That is by
Correct.
design, which is why this needs to change.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
I remember in the history that I was taught in 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade and 11th, they always use this term Reconstruction after the Civil War. And what I was taught, what we were taught in class was Reconstruction was, well, we had to reconstruct all the buildings and all the churches and all the houses and all the roads, and that was the Reconstruction. Well, turns out, and it shocked me when AVR said, no, Reconstruction is reconstruction of your government. Your actual government.
Right.
And I was like, wow, okay. They got that wrong. On purpose, but they got that wrong.
And which means, right, that naturally your mind goes to, well, if you need to reconstruct your government, then that means that it was dismantled.
Yeah.
So,
what happened to it?
Exactly.
1863 Civil War happened to it.
Yeah.
Well, and there are many things leading up to the Civil War, and Anna von Reitz has talked about, Abraham Lincoln basically being a traitor and basically being a not so honest Abe. He was a bar attorney, and I got to thinking, well, who else was a bar attorney? Well, if you go back in time, Buchanan, the one before Lincoln, was a bar attorney. Pierce, before Buchanan, was a bar attorney. Everybody else, I think Fillmore. I traced it back, and the only man who was not a bar attorney was James Madison. So in my opinion, our lawful governance stopped in 1817 with James Madison. So
wow.
So I think it goes well before the Civil War.
Yeah, and I just want to add, for any of our viewers who is still stuck on the fact that Abraham Lincoln was a good guy, he was a good president, and he actually emancipated anybody. I would go back and do a little bit more digging there, and also look into the 1040 bonds that he created with the greenbacks, and look at the Bottomry bond scandal. Do a little research there and see what you come up with. So our next question, Kevin, is this is for you. What is the biggest drawback to the nationwide grassroots movement of restoring the Constitution for the United States of America? And that is united, being that it's not part of the name, but it is, describing the states of America as an adjective, unincorporated.
Okay, the biggest drawback is the people. Trying to get people on board, trying to get people to learn their actual history. I have a good friend from college, and he posts on Facebook, and all he says is Democrats this, Democrats that, Democrats this, Democrats that. You need to get out and vote. And I keep telling him, why are you voting in foreign elections? And I keep posting that, and it's not getting into his brain. And there's a lot of people like that. They just don't want to go beyond what they think they might know. They don't want to step outside. And it's just like Randy said earlier, it's an energy thing. You have to have the vibrational match to the message of what you are to receive, right? So if you're not vibrating at a certain level, you're never going to learn that history. You're never going to learn that there are, 3 or more constitutions.
You're not going to be open to it.
Yeah. So it's hard, and I shouldn't be talking like this, but because I'm putting out a vibrational statement, but I don't have any other way to say it other than this. What, Randy?
No, you keep going, Kevin. I just want to let you know I'm ready to.
So I getting people on board. So the first challenge is getting people on board into your assembly. Okay. Now we do have people coming on board here and there. We get maybe roughly on average 1 per week. But once they become an American State National, they're nowhere to be found, right? And so we invite them to come out to the meetings, but very few come out to the meetings. And then even more so, when somebody does start coming out to meetings, it would be nice if they took a position of responsibility, right? We don't have leadership roles, we don't have power positions, but we do have responsibilities, right? So the people that have stepped up to responsibilities, like Randall, thank you, Randy. Thank you to everybody else in Virginia who has taken a position of responsibility. But that's the hardest part: getting people on board, and then getting people involved.
And if I might add there, if you don't mind, and then I want to hear what Randy has to say. What we seem to find is that the indoctrination is so tough because we have been living the majority of our lives with thinking that our only responsibility and our only job as a part of a government is going to an election booth and casting a vote. And that's really all we had to do. So getting people to truly understand that the American government was supposed to be run by the people. That's why it's called a government for, of, and by the people. It's all of us, right? It's not just, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to tell you how you should do things, but I'm not going to take on any responsibility. Like we all have a responsibility to get involved. And I do believe one of our founders, I think it was Benjamin Franklin, right, that said, we have a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it, right? And we also were told, I think, by Thomas Jefferson that we must stay diligent, and we haven't been diligent. So that's all I wanted to add. Randall, what did you want to say?
Well, going back to at some point, there was no Republican and Democrat Party. We were either Republicans or in later years, we became Federalists, but there was really no division. We all fought for the same goal. We just wanted a different way to get there. But that's what a healthy government should be doing. Those debates should happen to create the best move. But again, that voice comes from the people to those fiduciary delegates, right? So if you're not going to do the voice of the people, if you're not going to do the work of the people, get out of there. But ultimately, that creates that healthy debate to form the best governance for our people. Having said that, you brought up the word indoctrination. And this goes along with that she. And Kevin kind of skipped a beat there. I think he was afraid to step on some toes. This is where I feel a little bit different. If you're going to create she and you want she to change, there's got to be shock and awe in someone's life. No more political correctness. You can't be I'm sorry. It's not like I'm trying to be ugly, but I'm going to tell you some truth and you may not like it. I had a father like this. Well, and a mother too. My father was like this. He told you what you needed to hear, not what you wanted to hear, right? And that's what our government does. Our government tells us what we want to hear, not what is actual. That has to change. So when we have a conversation with people, and I do so at the gym and around, I no longer am concerned about how they feel about me when I leave them. If I left them with anger, if I left them with some curiosity, then I've done my job, because that's the only way people are going to truly wake up to what's going on. And I hear it all the time, grocery stores, at the gym, whine, complain. They're indoctrinated. That's what we've been doing for decades, right? And nothing ever gets done because the voice of the people's not being heard. Right. Well, we as American State National, I think, have a responsibility to step out of that box and say truth. If you want to call it Telegram red pilling, go ahead and whatever it is. But the truth has to come out. And if it shocks and awes and hurts somebody's feelings, I'm sorry, so be it. That's just the way I feel about it. I'm not trying to be ugly to anyone, because we're at mercy and we're a people of peace. But ultimately, people need to somehow get that shock to wake up. And I'm rambling. I'll yield. Thank you. Sorry.
Well, I think I really resonate with what you're saying there. And that is that, sometimes the truth is offensive. And we've got to be ready, willing, and able to tell the truth. And I think you're bringing up a really good and important point there, Randy. And by the way, could you explain the training that you did to become a Marshal at Arms and
Sure.
like what that role entails? what do you like and what do you find challenging in that role?
Okay, so a quick kind of history. As you know, we only got papered up in June of last year, right? So I'm just a little over a year into this thing now. We started to religiously come to meetings. By the way, my wife is also treasurer, so she's the treasurer of our assembly. Anyway, moving forward. So one thing, Lisa, we're going to meetings, and all of a sudden, this dictate comes down from AVR and the Federation, and Kevin lays it out for us. We have to elect our first office, and it has to be Marshal at Arms. We need a volunteer to be Marshal at Arms. So the entire tiles of Zoom, everybody's just sitting there. And I'm like, okay, I got this. Right? And now, Tammy, you and I talked about my medical background. Actually, like a personal trainer I've been into this for 50 years. So the body is my thing. I had no clue. I was never in law enforcement, never in this any kind of enforcement. And here I am going, I got this. And I'll learn on the way. So from that point on, I would have been very fortunate to be able to attend the Continental Bridge, the Continental Marshal Bridge calls for Marshal at Arms coming through our Continental Marshals, through Anna von Reitz and the Federation. Learned a lot there. Oh God, I can't forget the handbook, the Drill Assembly Handbook with the roles of the Marshal at Arms. Then there's the Sheriff Handbook. We've created our own Sheriff Handbook. And the roles of the Sheriff and the Marshal at Arms, the Sheriff is external, we're internal, but yet some of those gray areas in the middle are common, right? For example, and this will bring me to my next segue here. What do we do? Our first and foremost responsibility is safety and security of our assemblies, our general and our drill assembly. In fact, any meeting that we have as an assembly, if we ever get to a point where we can have business assemblies or anything else or committees or whatever, I'm expected to be involved in that, making sure that who's coming into our Zoom call is appropriate to be there. You know, we read the Bevins Declaration, making sure that people that have ulterior motives coming in to sneak in and take a listen and take it back to someone else, or gosh knows, use that color of law and arrest us for something, being a terrorist or something. That's my role and responsibility in that regard. But here's where it expands outward. When we have a brick and mortar church or whatever that looks like, or a court, excuse me, I meant court. I now physically am in that court, and I am the one guiding the security of people coming in and out of the court system, making sure that everyone within the court, albeit the spectators or the claimant or the accused or whatever it happens to be, the counselors, I'm keeping the peace. If somebody's getting a little, I got to kind of step in and say, whoa, chill it out a little bit. We all love each other here. We're just trying to make some remedy. Let's move on, kind of stuff. So we do that within the court system. And of course, I've got to make sure that everybody's coming in is rightful and lawful to be there. Outside of that, we can move into the election process. I have been working on a vetting process. My vetting process is about done. I'm working on elections, on how to run elections in our state. And this is where we kind of work with the sheriff, his deputies, and our militia to perform a valid, effective vetting process for our nominees for our elections, for our state, and eventually our county, and maybe even up to our state level, whatever. But then it's guarding the precincts. How many precincts do we need? Who do we need to put in place to make sure that we're doing our paper ballots correctly, right? We're not going to do the machine thing, right? We're going to have printed ballots, and they're going to use a pencil, and we're going to watch them and walk them to the box. And then our militia, and our deputies are going to make sure they watch that box. We're going to make sure those precincts are safe. Then we're going to make, when the voting is over at 7 o'clock in the evening or 8 o'clock, whatever our assemblies decide is our election process, we're going to take that box with the deputies and we're going to store it in a nice, secure place. And then we're going to count those ballots, and we're going to count those ballots with our deputies and our militia, with overseeing security to make sure that each of those ballots is counted one at a time, and it's seconded to make sure that our count is accurate, and that so we can, by mid-morning, late in the morning, we can announce our winners. So the Marshal at Arms has a responsibility in sort of that area. We don't ride around in squad cars going, "Oh, I got you." That's not what the Marshal at Arms does, right? We're sort of in more of an internal law enforcement. Excuse me. Well, we keep the peace within our organization. I'm still using de facto terms. Sorry, I'm still learning to get.
Yeah, no, it's understanding.
Yeah.
So are
If
we?
Kevin wants to add, feel free.
So we're not going to be using Dominion voting machines, right?
No, I
God
thought
forbid.
about it okay, no, we're not going to do it now. No, in fact, you know what? I've been reading back on this. Did you know the earliest voting was all verbal? They didn't even use ballots. You showed up at your church or your courthouse. There was people up front that took your name and say, "What say you?" "I vote for Lincoln." And the idea is it's all transparent. Everybody knows who's voting for you. And the idea is if you're unable to have a conversation or a debate with your fellow Americans about what's right or what's wrong, you don't have any reason to be voting, because that means you don't know. So the earliest voting was done verbal. They didn't have to worry about paper and pencil. They just had the people there to keep the peace, and they went through one, I guess, district or county at a time. But what happened later on is some people felt intimidated by that. And so then it went to secret, and then it finally went to paper. So I actually looked back on this. And so these are all discussions once our General Assembly gets to a point where we can actually talk about truly holding our elections for our counties and on up, that we will have somewhere to start as how we're actually going to enact this as Virginia State. So that'll yield. I hope that answers some questions.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Randy.
Welcome.
Yeah, I love that. And I would say that I love the fact that we are peacekeepers, right? Peacekeeping task force. We're not quote unquote law enforcement, but I agree that it's hard to get yourself out of that terminology after using it for so long. So, I would give yourself some grace there, Randall.
Thank you.
So my next question is to Kevin. Can you tell us how close the Virginia Assembly is to having all four pillars up and functioning? And are you close to invoking Ex Parte Milligan? And I think also we probably should touch on what Ex Parte Milligan is for those viewers today that are unaware.
Okay, so in terms of Ex Parte Milligan, basically that's a decision between military tribunals and civil courts. So the basic idea is if civil courts are up and running, then the military tribunals must stand down. Okay. And what everybody's being subjected to are these military tribunals. I've heard a couple state assemblies, I think Michigan and Texas, and I think maybe California, or maybe it's Washington. They have
We're getting close, but we're not there yet.
Okay. They have a Milligan, and so far the de facto is not honoring that, from what I can tell. But so that's more crimes by more criminals. But here in Virginia, we have a good, strong General Assembly. And like I said, we've had that since April 9th of 2019. We have a peacekeeping task force, which meets every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard. And we have a good number of people. In effect, Randall is part of that. And we have the person who helps run that is a ex-Navy SEAL. So there's no better person to be running the militia and peacekeeping task force committee than him. So that they've done a lot of work. So that pillar is up and standing. in terms of our jural, we have 19 we have a jury pool of 19. We have our first justice was elected in. Her name is Shirley Lanier Bryant Smith. So she is the first justice in well over 160 years. I was voted in as the second justice. We have a coroner and deputy coroner, and Randy serves in one of those positions as well. So Randy's doing 8 different things. Maybe I should start calling Randy.
I'll explain that when you're done, Kevy.
Okay. So, but we need additional position holders, right? We need people stepping up for to take a responsible position. We need a sheriff. We need a bail bondsman or bailiff, and there's probably a couple other positions there also. And we can't invoke Ex Parte Milligan until we have those positions filled. Okay, and on the coordinator call, Terry said that all we needed was 13, a jury pool of 13. But having read some of AVR's other articles, I think we need some more people to stand up into positions. So I envision, hopefully, that we will be invoking Ex Parte Milligan sometime next spring. Okay. So as far as the fourth pillar, nobody really talks about the fourth pillar that much, at least not from what I can tell. Our business pillar, our international business pillar, we do have, as an assembly, we did create by vote, a business committee, and we did elect by vote by the assembly a business chairman and banking chairman. So his name is Scott. Scott is also our secretary. So Scott is filling multiple positions too. But going back to that fourth pillar, I really don't know how that gets invoked. So I think, and I've not heard of any discussions about it, and I've not really seen anything written by AVR about it, other than this pillar must exist. Well, how do we officially form it? Is it some type of compact, or is it a written document that upstands that fourth pillar? I don't know, but there are other things that we need to concentrate as an assembly. Like, we still have notices that need to go out. So I think the notices are going to probably take the rest of this year, and then we're going to probably work on the banking or that international business pillar probably sometime in early next year. So I'm hoping all of our 4 pillars here in Virginia are upstanding and complete by midsummer of next year. That's my internal, what the little voice in my head says.
That's a great goal. I love that.
Now, I know Terry wants every assembly to be done by the end of this year, but I'm sorry, it's not going to happen for Virginia. We might need an additional 6 months.
Yeah, I think it's going to take some time to get people out of their indoctrination, cognitive dissonance. That I think is the biggest hindrance for all of our assemblies, is just because it requires people to correct their status and come back to the land and soil and be Americans once again, and to work our assemblies. And if they're still in this, matrix mind, thinking that this is how life is supposed to work, this is how their government is supposed to work, it's going to take some time to correct that. And until that happens, and it's hard to say when it'll happen, because it's happening at different time periods for different people, right? Everybody's on their own discovery journey and wake up journey. And so until that happens, it's part of my prayers every single day, probably 2 or 3 times a day. So, and I'm sure it's part of all of yours. So, but I love those goals, Kevin. Thank you for sharing that with us.
May I piggyback?
Yeah, go ahead, Randy.
So going back to Ex Parte Milligan, we brought up our old friend Abraham Lincoln earlier ago. It was by the design of the greenbacks, where Abraham needed the military to guard the banks, and he brought out the Lieber Code, or General Order 100. And that was sort of the start of the military control of not just the banking system, but they eventually just kind of weaseled their way in through the federal government to the court system and everything else. Anyway, going back to coroner and deputy coroner. All right, so we had a gentleman just raise his hand and said, okay, I'll do it. Yeah, he's an EMT. He's been in the business for a long time. That actually, by the way, was the position I was eyeing early on because of my background. But at any rate, as we think about it, I cannot be a coroner and a marshal at arms at the same time, because if the coroner is required to do his service in the courtroom and I have to be in the courtroom for security, I cannot perform both duties. So because of my background, however, and the assembly was okay with this, and I told our gentleman who stepped up to the plate for this, I said, I'd be happy to assist you. He wasn't exactly comfortable in the position. I was ready to rock and roll. But I said, how about if I help you? I said, we can learn how to record baby deeds, because that's what people don't know, that coroners in those times, they didn't just record deaths, right? It was also births. And they wrote the family's birth in a Bible, handed them the Bible with the date, the pounds, and everything the doctor told them. I don't know if they were doing APGAR scores then or not, but basically, and then it's recorded. Then it's recorded basically to our land recording office, not to the territorial municipal government. So we can work on that. But ultimately, if we're out on a job and we have to look at a circumstance where maybe someone unfortunately has lost their life, and we've got to determine what that causative factor was, I said, I'm happy to assist you in that regard. But beyond that, I can't get involved into the court system where you might be needed because of my conflict of interest. So I'm the deputy coroner. So in that regard, I feel like that can work to help get our coroner position up and running. And so moving on with our court system, we still need a court recorder, a clerk of court, a bondsman, and or a bailiff. We have 2 justices. We have our marshal at arms. We're about there. And I keep writing people. I've got a couple young ladies that come onto our stuff all the time that are really helping us with verbiage on our notices. They would be really good for court recorders and clerk of courts, because a clerk of courts is that gatekeeper of that process, right? So they have to be dot their I's, slash their T's, and to move us forward. So we're continuing to try and recruit. Sorry, I'm going to ramble.
No, but I just, can I pause just 1 second?
Sure.
Just for our viewers? Could you just talk a little bit about why it's so important for us to get our courts up and functioning? You know, because we're talking about all these different positions to get that General Assembly up and functioning. Could you just touch very briefly, on why that's so important?
Well, again, going back to Ex Parte Milligan, because of the military tribunals that were taking place, we're really stepping on some feet to try and put up our civil courts, our county and our state civil court. But why is it important? Our American state nationals, the people that are within our boundaries of our state, that are Virginians on the land and soil, need a place to go to solve their problems in terms of if they do something wrong. Okay, somebody runs over somebody's mailbox up on their yard by accident, right? So where do they go? Okay, so we're not going to say, I'm going to sue you. The other person doesn't go, I'm going to sue you and I'm going to take you to court. We're going to make a complaint against you and take you to that municipal court over there, and you're going to pay us thousands of dollars, right? Our people need a different place to go. They need to go to a place where we're seeking remedy with mercy. We can bring back, if we need to, we can bring back civilian arrests, right? But anyway, so 2 people are supposed to work it out first, and that's the first level or phase of being able to get into our civil court system. As the 2 people have to learn to work it out first. But as they go through that process, what they will learn is that they are in fact innocent until proven guilty, and both the accused and the claimant are going to have an opportunity to state their case. And if they can't work it out together, then it goes to arbitration. If arbitration doesn't work, then it goes on to where a petite jury. And if it's really crazy, then we're going to have to convene the grand jury with the sheriff, and we're going to have to do some major investigating to figure out why this isn't working out. But we need to have that our own court to be able to bring that common law back to the people of Virginia. That's what it's all about. I hope that answered your question.
Yes. And I think to just hit home is that we don't have those kinds of courts anywhere in our country right now. You know, that's why it's so important for the people to come back to the land and soil jurisdiction, correct your political status, take on a responsibility in one of these positions, and help us to get these courts up and functioning again so that we can see some common sense, some peace, some normalcy again, you know, and so that we're not like Randall just said about a mailbox and then taking it all the way to a Supreme Court because people can't figure out how to work it out amongst themselves. You know, I mean, that's insanity, but that's what's happening because people have been taught to use a situation like that to, you know, gain some financial gain, right? By using attorneys and all sorts of things. So we want to avoid those things, get back to normalcy again. And we can't do that unless we have our General Assemblies standing and be able to have our courts up and functioning.
All right. And
so thank you for...
You're welcome. And along that same note is we don't allow appeals. So we don't go from our county court up to the state court, up to the Supreme Court. You're not allowed to appeal, right? Unless a grand jury is convened and they find reason to believe. And so the money that a person may or may not have to expend isn't anywhere near what money is going to have to expend on a counselor, not a bar attorney. They can have a counselor to help advise them, but they're not going to dictate the law of the British Admiralty rule over the heads of those people. So at any rate, I'm sorry, I'll yield.
No, all of this is really great. So thank you for every contribution that you're making, because it really just actually it adds and helps people comprehend really all the work that needs to get done. So and it sounds like we've already touched a little bit up on like what are some of the challenges in growing the assembly. So I guess I'm just going to go straight to, you know, how can viewers support you and your assembly?
The best support that I have found, well, if you're a viewer in Virginia, please do your paperwork and join our assembly and take a position of responsibility. So that's the best way if you're in Virginia and you actually want to return, you know, reconstruct your lawful governance here in Virginia. But in terms of help from other assemblies, the best thing I found is Mattermost. I mean, the best thing to do is post a question on Mattermost, and somebody always responds with, "Oh, here's a template, or here's a document. Read this, watch this." So, I mean, I, as a coordinator, I know other coordinators like the Tennessee coordinator, and I talk to her from time to time, and the Maryland coordinator, John, I talk to him from time to time. So I've talked to the Ohio coordinator one time. I forget about what, but just maintaining and keeping an open dialogue with other assemblies is nice. Now, there are some jurisdictional things we need to think about in terms of we can't have one assembly come in to the other assembly, but just having Mattermost and discussions with other coordinators, or just people on Mattermost just offering suggestions and help. That's a big help for Virginia. But like I said, if you're watching this and you're on Virginia and you're still a U.S. citizen or a citizen of the United States, please do your due diligence and your homework and start reading and correct your political status. Start coming to our General Assembly meetings and take on at least one position of responsibility.
May I piggyback?
Go ahead.
Proverbs 24:10. When you falter in times of trouble, how weak is thy strength? How many of you believe you're in trouble today? How many of you believe that your government is not working for you, is holding you back? For those that know, are thieving from you. And where is your strength in your spirit? Our God works through us. Your God, whoever that person or deity may be, works through us. It's very hard to change where you've all been. I lived it. It took some major events to get me to see the light, but I had to stop complaining. I had to stop playing the victim. I had to get rid of my fear, trust in my God that I was doing the right thing. And if you truly believe that you are ready to set this, I almost said ship, sorry, to turn this boat around and get us sailing back to the land and soil in Virginia, then we need your help. But freedom isn't easy. It's hard. It's work. I probably spend 5 or 6 meetings a week, and I'm still trying to work part-time. I get all that. And I had to lose my job to get woken up, and we're working on a full mortgage with half salary. Sacrifice will be necessary. But in the end, the prize will be worth it. Your God, your spirit will drive you. Be strong, have courage. Bring it to our assembly, learn, help stand us up. And at that, I'll yield.
Awesome.
Thank you. That was beautiful, Randall. Perfect words of wisdom there.
Thank you.
And so I would just say, I know Michelle had to get off because she had a work commitment, but I just wanted to say, I mean, those were beautiful last words, Randall. I don't know if you want to say anything more, but Kevin, maybe you want to say some last words to our audience. And I will ask too, that there are some people, some very generous people out there that may not be ready to correct their status, but perhaps they want to financially support you. On your website, do you have a donation button? Is there a place where people can donate money to you?
I don't know that. I don't know.
That's awesome, Tammy.
That's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
Where were we at?
I'm actually going to write that down right now.
I know that, the audience needs to know that a lot of this is not just time and energy spent, but it's money out of our own pockets that are paying for the postage to send notices and all the other things. It could be flyers that they're creating, or it could be some kind of marketing thing. But, if you want to donate money to the Virginia Assembly, I'm sure there's maybe there's a P.O. box, you could mail a check to their assembly. I'm sure they would really much appreciate it. But we really would like the people to come back to the land and soil, especially for the Virginia Assembly. But Kevin, would you close us off with some last words?
Gee, I really don't have any last words. I just thank you, Randy, for coming on. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Tammy, for having us. I guess I'm at a loss for last words.
Yeah, I think Randy pretty much said it all. Just come back home to the land and soil and help us to reconstruct our lawful government.
So,
My last. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say Randy is a much more eloquent speaker, so if he has any last words, I will defer to Randall.
I think I unloaded very well on our folks. Good luck to all of you, everyone out there listening. We're moving along. Come give us a hand. That's all we're asking.
Wonderful. Yes. And I want to let the viewers know, if they hadn't paid attention, I've had your website scrolling across the bottom of the screen. And for those of you who are listening, it's thevirginiaassembly.org. Okay. So reach out to them, reach out to Kevin, the coordinator, and learn how you could correct your status and get out of that modern day slavery and back to freedom. And if you are on another state and you are the coordinator of another state, please reach out to me. This is the email address. It is quite long, but it's the American States Assemblies podcast at proton.me. please reach out to me. I'd love to get your state on one of our podcasts and interview you all. So thank you for watching our podcast today, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much, Tammy, and belatedly to Michelle. We appreciate your time. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah,
You're
thank you.
so welcome. It's our pleasure.
Yep. God bless.